Welcome, everybody, back to the Three-Man Rush podcast. And it looks like only two men are actually rushing tonight because our boy Andrew is on vacation, a much-deserved vacation, should I say. So, I hope whenever he's listening to this, hope you're having a great time, buddy. And get back safe. Hope you and the family are good. And before we do get started on what we're going to cover, I do want to just give a special shout out. I know Jared feels the same way. To the people of Ukraine. We stand with you, and just stay safe. I hope all this ends with the least amount of bloodshed possible. War is the worst thing in human history, and we all just really feel for the people of Ukraine. So Ukraine, you do have our support, and just stay safe if you're in that area. But now to move on to the podcast. So this is the Three-Man Rush podcast. You can find us on YouTube, find us on Apple, find us on Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. If you are on YouTube, go ahead, click the link and click the like button and the subscribe button. That way you can get notifications just in case, you do like what you hear here. If you're a Colts fan, you're really going to enjoy this one. Because look, Andrew got his podcast last week, which, I mean, rightfully so. He earned that podcast. The Rams they earned this podcast, but for the wrong reasons, the Colts earned this podcast. So with Jared being a former Colts fan, and which, I mean, you say you are, but we all know. We all know deep down you're right. You ride or die. Been a lot of dying lately, but well, me being a Colts fan and all the rumors that have been going around, I really wanted to do this podcast with Jared. So if you don't know, I'm your host, Landon Oliver. This is my host, Jared Holly. And we are both Indianapolis Colts fans. Let's take a moment of silence.
That's long enough.
All right. Yeah, I was like, all right, and we're back. All right, Big Jared. So it's been a lot of talk last couple of weeks around the Indianapolis Colts. And some pretty high level people with a lot of high level intel in the organization. Chris Mortensen first reported it. Then, Zach Kiefer, Stephen Holder. There's been a few more guys. If I'm just, forgetting off the top of my head, they have all reported within the last couple of weeks that the Colts will in fact move on from Carson Wentz after 1 year. We're talking about he's up for trade. If a trade's not made, they're just going to cut him outright before March 18th, which I believe is when his contract kicks in. So he's got $15 million guaranteed already. That goes up to $28 million after March 28th. So they actually save $13 million on the cap if they do cut him, or if they do trade him. If they get somebody to take on that contract, then they save the entire contract and are able to move on. But this is it's pretty wild to think about, man. Just a year ago, they traded for Wentz. They gave up, which ended up being a first-round pick, number 16 overall in this year's draft, and a third-round pick last year. And 1 year later, they're cutting bait.
Oh, even worse is the team they traded with made the playoffs.
Yeah, which, I mean, they had the same record. Both teams were 9-7, but one team plays in the NFC and the other one plays in the AFC. But, I mean, yeah, regardless. So you have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are technically a playoff team. They have 3 first-round picks this year, one of them belonging to the Colts. And the Colts are already, after 1 year, getting ready to move on. Or, all indications, can't say it happened until it happened, but all indications are they are moving on from Carson Wentz. So, Jared, real simple question here. What went wrong?
I mean, if you look at the numbers on Wentz, they weren't terrible. I think a lot of his issue, obviously, was when it mattered the most, he made bad decisions. And I think, the Colts made the playoffs the year prior with Phillip Rivers, who a lot of people felt like he was on his last leg. And you and I both agree that we thought Carson Wentz would be a improvement from Phillip Rivers, which, Phillip Rivers didn't play bad either, but Carson Wentz is significantly younger and more mobile. and it just did not work out. It's not like there was a lot of turnover in the organization. If anything, like it, I don't know where Carson Wentz lands at this point. His best chance of making a bounce back in his career was with the Colts last year, and it just didn't happen. As far as my thoughts on it, I think they're going to do one or two things. I'll make it short and sweet. They'll do one or two things. They'll try to hit a home run free agency and try to get somebody
or trade. Yeah.
Or trade. Yeah.
Yeah. Free agency. There's no home runs free agency.
Yeah. No, they'll try to trade. But as a fan, if I'm a fan of the Colts, like I don't want Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't feel like Garoppolo is going to get them any closer to what Philip Rivers or Carson Wentz did. Like it's going to literally be a tank season if Wentz walks, which he will, or they're going to go after a big name quarterback. And there's two out there right now that everyone's going after. If they were able to land one of those two guys, and they're in contention for that division.
Oh, I don't even think, I think the division's almost a foregone conclusion if they land one of those two names being Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. So to me, it is also kind of similar to just piggyback off what you said about what went wrong. So if you look at the raw stats, like you said, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 36.
That's a good year.
Yeah. You're looking at it and you're just like, hey, like, this guy didn't play bad at all. Where this is the perfect example of where stats don't tell the whole story. Because if you watch the film, you break down the film, and if you don't have to break down the film, if you just watch the games, in typical Carson Wentz fashion, the highs were high. Arizona, he's out there with a skeleton crew at wide receiver. COVID hit him hard there. Darius Leonard's out. Quentin Nelson's out. This receiver's out. This guy's out. He's out there throwing the no names. And in a game that I didn't even really think he played particularly well in, but whenever they needed to win the game, he drove down the field, made one of the best throws of the season, honestly, from any quarterback. To, I believe it was Desmond Patman is the guy that caught the ball, and that won him the game. But as with Carson Wentz, the high was high. The lows are very, 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 very low. So the Colts in one-score games this year were 2-5 in one-score games. A lot of that comes down to the play of the quarterback. And not only that, it wasn't even like the games were Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, you would go drives and it was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, one drive, the guy's rolling out there, Jonathan Taylor's doing his thing. Wentz is playing really good. He's, hitting guys in stride, getting the ball out quick, making quick decisions. And then the very next drive, I mean, the guy can throw a left-handed shovel pass while getting sacked by 3 guys. And, it's a pick 6. So there's a few things, like I said, whenever you actually watch the games, or if you do break down film, if you break down the film, that are really concerning. And especially with the type of offense the Colts want to run. They want to run, that quick passing game, get your guys the ball, because Frank Reich, say what you want about him as a coach, as a head coach, but as an offensive guy, he schemes guys open. There are guys open on almost every play. It's just whether or not, the quarterback is willing to take that read. And just far too many times, Wentz, would go to the first read, the guy would be open. He would look away from that and try to make the home run play instead of just making the correct play. And then the home run play is not there. Then he would look back to that first read. And by that, in the NFL, a couple seconds,
it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's done. And it killed the play. His reluctance to hit the check down. How many times were Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines just wide open this season? And as we know with both of those guys, they can take a dump off past 70 yards. I mean, and then just whenever the pressure was on, whenever you have a game to win, we need Jacksonville. I don't even want to get into the last 2 games just yet, but I mean, we need a play in Tennessee, melts down. We need another play in Tennessee, melts down. needed to play against the Rams. He tries to do the hero ball, gets hurt, sprains both his ankles, not one, but two. He sprains both his ankles. Only person I've ever known that does that. The New England or the New England game, he threw for 56 yards the whole game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't just, just a one game thing. I mean, the last half of the season, he played dreadful. And then that culminated with the Oakland loss, which there was a lot of other things that went wrong in those, but especially the Jacksonville loss. And you can say, hey, the offensive line didn't play well. The defense didn't play well. The receivers couldn't get open. All of that's true. I'm not arguing that at all. But that is when you, as a leader, as a quarterback, as a captain, he's a captain, you pull those guys aside and you say, hey, we have a 98% chance to make the playoffs. We're playing the worst team in the league. We're not going down like this. And he didn't do that. If anything, he actually went the opposite way. He folded. He had a QBR of 4, not 40, which would be terrible. 4 in that game.
Yeah, that should have he cost 2 games in Tennessee, or one. Well, no, I won't put one of them.
One of them was the sprained ankle game that he shouldn't have been back. But
so I always hate putting everything on one player, especially if it's a do or die game. I mean, it should have never even got to the point where they had to win that last game to make the playoffs. You had Tennessee that was dismantled with injuries within our division. We had the worst team in football in our division, and we lost 3 games between those 2 teams right there. The only team we were dominant against was Houston, and that was it. That's to me, Phillip Rivers wasn't losing that game. I can tell you, he would not have lost that game. Even if he was 40-year-old Phillip Rivers out there, he would have found a way to beat Jacksonville in week 17 or the Raiders. That's nothing against the Raiders. They fought extremely hard to get into the playoffs in the last few weeks of the season, and they overcame. That goes back to quarterback is everything. Derek Carr could have hung it up midway through season. We would have not faulted him for it because of everything that happened with that team. I mean, the Colts didn't have that kind of stuff happen within the organization. They had the best running back in football this season. They had a top 5 offensive line.
They didn't have a top 5 off. Their pass blocking was ranked 26th, but the quarterback.
That has a lot to do with Wentz too, though.
Yeah,
because that goes against the offensive line and the way.
Well, so I would say 65-35, with 65 being the actual offensive line, 35 of it being Wentz. I wouldn't even put it 50-50 because Eric Fisher was dreadful in pass protection this year. I mean,
yeah,
dreadful.
But what I'm getting at, though, is Joe Burrow had the worst offensive line in football, and they made the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? A quarterback is everything to an organization, and that's not the guy. He's just not. He had 1 year where he was the guy. He got Philadelphia into the playoffs. Nick Foles obviously won the Super Bowl, but they weren't going that far without Carson Wentz that season. Outside of that, man, he's been an all right quarterback. He's not a bust. I wouldn't say he's a bust, but he's not a franchise quarterback.
No, and I think even the Colts, obviously you want to land a franchise quarterback. That's the goal of every team in the NFL, unless you already have one. But I think even the Colts, moving on, I think they just value, you don't even need, a franchise quarterback play. You just need consistent play that's not going to kill you because, do they need more weapons on the outside? Yes. Do they need, an upgrade at tight end? Yes. Do they need a left tackle? Yes. Those things are all true. But like I said, there was many, many, many times in this offensive scheme where guys were open and either Carson Wentz couldn't make the read or he made the read, refused to throw the ball, went for the home run play. It wasn't there. The play's already dead at that point. And then that either resulted in incompletion, turnover, which he didn't limit the interceptions to an extent. He did have a lot of interceptions dropped, but
there was.
But that's every quarterback has that. But I think the Colts are just even looking right now for just consistency at that position. And there's also been now some, which I mean, take it with a grain of salt because there's always rumblings, at this time of the year, especially when things go bad, about Wentz, was given the captainship by Frank Reich. Like the captains are voted for by the players, by the team. Wentz's wasn't voted on; it was given to him by Frank Reich. Whether that's true or not, who knows if we'll ever know. And then there's been, some other rumblings that, the Colts organization, whether or not it was the players, whether or not it's the front office. I know Jim Irsay for sure just was not thrilled with his commitment. He wouldn't get the vaccine.
Oh yeah.
That was a big thing with Irsay because, the possibility of him missing games as a quarterback. And just some other like leadership things. They just wanted more at that position. I mean, look, whenever you go from Phillip Rivers, who's one of the ultimate leaders in professional football history, not just this last year. I mean, we're talking about in history. The guy's a bona fide stud as a guy in the locker room. Guys rally around Phillip Rivers. And whenever you go from that to Carson Wentz, I mean, you're going to see a steep drop off in leadership. But you would see you'd see a drop off in leadership from almost anybody when you have Phillip Rivers. But I think just it was more of a shocking drop off than it was a minor drop off. And like I said, whenever the cards are on the table, they needed a guy to make a play. They needed a guy to win. He folded. And that was my big worry. This was literally the worst case scenario for the Indianapolis Colts because whenever the trade went down, I texted Drew. Drew's always been a big Carson Wentz fan. I texted Drew. I've never been a big Carson Wentz guy. I've never got it. So I texted Drew. I said, hey, talk me into this. Tell me this is going to be a good thing. So Drew, sent me all this stuff. And it had me convinced. It's like, well, maybe Frank Reich is, key to his success. And
exactly. That's the reason why his window of failure was a lot lower for this season because a lot of people were really down on him after, the previous year for rightful reasons. He had a terrible season, but you could contribute that to an offensive line that was just pathetic. No running game. They were picking people out of parking lot at wide receiver. So it's kind of hard to judge him that season. He goes to a situation in Indianapolis where he has a coach where he had his best year ever as his head coach. He was his offensive coordinator. And he's just not the answer. That's all. That's pretty much it at the end of the day.
And like I said, this is the worst case scenario because now he played well enough to where he couldn't be benched. But
there wasn't many options either.
Yeah, but Matthew Stafford was an option. They didn't want to pay the price for Stafford. That's on the front office. So,
I meant as far as the quarterback depth chart on the team. That they had last year.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Either he plays bad enough to where they're in contention. For a little, especially when they started 1-5. They were looking at a top 5 pick, and they dug themselves out of that hole. So he played well enough to where he couldn't be benched because they were, climbing out 98% chance of making the playoffs. And then like I said, he just folded at the end of the year. They missed the playoffs and now the Eagles own that first round draft pick and now they're moving on. So you paid a first rounder, a third rounder for 1 year of mediocre at best play. And now, apparently, from everything we hear, and these are really, really high level sources. I'm not taking this with a grain of salt. It's rumbled enough to where, look, I'm telling you right now, Carson Wentz isn't going to be back. Whether he's cut, whether he's traded, he's not going to be the quarterback next year. So now
he's gone.
Yeah. So now we transition into what now? Because I'm going to read you off the list of free agent quarterbacks that are available this year. So we have Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Teddy Bridgewater, Mitchell Trubisky,
I would maybe do 1 year of Mariota because he'll be cheap. And if they can't, keep going.
Andy Dalton, Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton. I mean, and then it just gets even worse from there. You're looking at Geno Smith, Chad Henne, like those type of guys.
Chad Henne's still in the league.
He is. He's a backup. And then, available via trade, you have Jimmy Garoppolo, possibly Kirk Cousins, depending on what happens with that contract. And then we all know, we don't know what's going on with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. We don't know any of that. But I'm not going to speculate that those guys are available until they're available. So, I mean, taking out Wilson, taking out Rodgers, it doesn't look good.
And I know you hate the Titans, but I mean, out of all those people you named off, does that make the Colts rostered over Tennessee's current roster?
I'd have to wait and see what they did in free agency. Look, I don't dislike Jimmy Garoppolo for what the Colts would need from him to win. It'd be very similar to the San Francisco situation.
You're going to pay him, though.
You are going to pay him, and you're going to have to give up a pick to get him.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be available via trade. So I don't know if that's a viable option. The draft, everybody says this is an underwhelming quarterback year. I honestly don't buy that. I don't think there's that top tier guy in the draft. Like, excuse me, your Trevor Lawrence, your Andrew Luck, Joe Burrow. That guy
Who's
doesn't
that
exist.
Who's that kid from Pitt?
Kenny Pickett.
He's going to go pretty early, though, isn't he?
Well, that's the thing is like there's no quarterbacks in this draft that are surefire things, but they all each do their own things well. I don't think this is a bad quarterback draft. In all honesty, I think it's actually going to end up being one of those drafts where 3-4 years down the line, we're looking at it kind of similar to, the Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. When those guys were coming out, Sam Darnold was the surefire thing. And then you had Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson that, guys weren't really super high on because they were such projects, and we see how that worked out. So there are a few of those guys, Malik Willis in this class, Desmond Ridder, I'm actually a pretty big fan of, Carson Strong, Kenny Pickett, like you mentioned, Matt Corral, Sam Howell. So I mean, could they draft
There's
a rookie?
some good players.
Yeah. So I mean, could they draft a rookie? Possibly. But the issue with that is rookies take time, and you have Darius Leonard, DeForest Buckner, Quentin Nelson, Jonathan Taylor, even as a running back. He's 23, but we know the lifespan of running backs in the NFL. You're going to waste the prime years of these guys getting a rookie ready. So I don't know if that's necessarily the move for them. Do they have to settle for 1 year of bad play, like you said? And even if they do decide, I don't think they're going to decide to tank, but what worries me with that is I think this roster is too good to end up with a top 5 pick. I think the roster's too good.
I
think even with a middle, like even with a Marcus Mariota, even with
or a 6-7
Jameis win, exactly. I mean, you're looking. Well, I mean, you're probably looking at 7-8 wins.
And AFC South's still not a good division either.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe Jacksonville, takes a leap with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. Possible. Maybe the Deshaun Watson thing works itself out. I don't think Houston's competing next year though. And then you still have Tennessee. So I mean, right now Tennessee would be my favorite to win the division until the shoe drops on the Colts quarterback situation. But yeah, man, there's not really much of a sense of direction.
No, there's not. And I think their best bet is to, if Wilson, like at the end of the day, I think I don't think teams mean to tank, or like, especially at the beginning of the season. Like, I think that's not really an option. I think, midway through they learn where they're at, kind of thing. If it's me, like, you're going to let Wentz walk. If you can't land a franchise guy that's going to literally give you a legit shot at a run, I think you go after like a Marcus Mariota type of player, even Cam Newton. I know his arm is
no.
for what he can do for how
Cam
they're
doesn't.
built.
Well, Cam
Like,
doesn't. Cam doesn't fit the offense they want to run. That's the problem.
yeah, I think Mariota, like I've since when he played for the Raiders the last couple of seasons, when he gets out in the field, man, he's electric.
Yeah,
And
and it looks like his
you can
arm's
run
gotten
some
stronger.
packages with him, and
Yeah,
he's definitely a
but
threat with his legs. So
yeah, I think the Colts though, like so the type of offense Frank Reich wants to run, like I said, he wants to run that West Coast quick passing game where the quarterbacks are diagnosing pre-post snap coverages, they're making the correct read, they're getting the ball out of their hands quickly, and you're allowing your offensive playmakers to do the work, which look, they're going to need to upgrade their offensive playmakers because right now it's Michael Pittman
yeah,
and a bunch of dudes. That's
yeah. Ty is pretty much done.
Ty's
He's
toasted.
done.
You can't count on
Jack
Paris
Doyle's pretty
Campbell.
much done.
Yeah, Paris
Yeah.
Campbell, you can't count on him to stay healthy right now, which I mean, look, if he hits, great, but you're not going into the season counting on that guy. And then Zach Pascal, good player. Is he a game changer? No. So
my phone went off.
No, you're good. So yeah, I mean like we didn't even touch on tight end. Tight end Jack Doyle is getting older. He's probably going to retire more than likely. We'll see. And then you have Mo Alley Cox, who's a free agent. I know they like him. They'll probably want to bring him back. And then they drafted Kylan Granson last year. But none of those guys are going to make, they're not going to be playmakers for you. So, I mean, you're going to have to upgrade the playmaker, regardless of who's behind center. You're going to have to upgrade the playmakers. But I can tell you this: Jim Irsay, after that game in Jacksonville, that guy was pissed. That guy was really, 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 really mad. Probably the most mad I've ever seen him, because I've never known him to call the coach and the GM into a meeting.
Them all out.
Well, no, he called the coach and GM into a meeting when the plane landed. He didn't wait, for the next day. He didn't wait for a week after the season. He called him in that night. And from what Chris Ballard has said, and then what's kind of been reported from some guys with some inside sources, he lit into them. So you have to think those guys are on the hot seat. I know they just got the contract extensions, but look, Jim Irsay is all about winning Super Bowls. That's what that guy wants to do. And he's promised, 2 Super Bowls this decade. I mean, the guy wants to deliver a Super Bowl. And another thing with Jim is, look, he's getting older. He's not getting any younger. He's getting older.
Mm-hmm.
There's not too far from now, he's going to want to hand the team over to his daughters. Before he retires, before he goes, into the music foray or whatever he's going to do, before he gives that franchise over, he wants another Super Bowl, and he's damn near willing to do whatever to do it. And so I think you're going to see the Colts get really, really, really aggressive this offseason. If the Aaron Rodgers shoe drops, they'll be in on Aaron Rodgers. I can guarantee you. But most teams will. And then
every team.
Every
team will.
Yeah, except for about 7 or 8 teams, they'll be on Aaron Rodgers. And then the Russell Wilson thing, I don't know if he'll generate as much interest as Aaron Rodgers is, but there'll be plenty of teams in on that as well. The thing with Wilson is he has a no trade clause, so he can pretty much kind of pick and choose, if he wants out of Seattle, hey, this is where I want to go. This is the only team I'm waiving my clause for. So I mean, there's some interest there, for sure. And it came out today, reported that Jim Irsay is basically banging the table for Russell Wilson. He wants Russell Wilson in a Colts uniform. He's always, I know, he's peaked on him. Actually, he's spoken on him a couple times now throughout the years, saying that, outside of Andrew Luck, that's who the Colts really liked in that draft at quarterback, but they had Andrew Luck sitting there. But Jim Irsay has always been a huge Russell Wilson fan. He loves what the guy stands for. Great leader, Christian faith, good culture, and he makes the franchise look really good. You're never going to get anything bad out of Russell Wilson. And
no, he's a good figure for like the NFL in general.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
that's the other thing. I think the Colts too, like they struggle as far as that big name guy. Like, like they don't have Jonathan Taylor could be that, but he's in year 2. Like this was year 2 for him. So he's not quite there yet.
Darius Leonard's
those are great players, but I mean, at the end of the day,
you're looking for like a face of the league type of guy.
Yes,
Aaron Patrick Donald, Mahomes,
Patrick
Allen.
Mahomes, yes, like
and Russell
Wilson is on that level. Like, he's on that level. So automatically, like, I think they're looked at completely different for destination spots for other players too, because there'll be guys that want to play with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and whether he wants out, whether he's even going to be traded, we're not going to speculate, but I mean, I think that's the type of move the Colts are wanting to make this year. They're wanting to, 2-3 first round picks, Pro Bowl center Ryan Kelly, because, they got Danny Pinner behind him. Whenever Ryan Kelly missed those few games this year, Danny Pinner played really, really, really good football for him. He's still on a rookie contract. So, I mean, they're willing to part with some guys. Now, I don't know if they'll trade Quentin Nelson or Darius Leonard or anybody like that. Because, I mean, you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, because you get your quarterback in here finally, and then his supporting cast is, lessened, which makes it harder on him. But, that might be what they're going to have to do to get a guy. But I can definitely see them. I can see Jim Irsay saying, like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how many first round picks. I don't care how much money he wants. I don't basically I don't give a shit. Get him and get him.
Make it happen.
Yeah. Make it happen. And look, this regime, for as great as they've drafted and as great, as many accolades as the media gives them, you hear that, 7 Pro Bowlers, multiple all pros drafted. And Chris Ballard has done a really great job drafting. But that being said, since Frank Reich took over, since Chris Ballard has taken over, that team is 41-40 with 1 playoff win and no division titles. At the end of the day, you can draft well all you want. It's a results-oriented business. And right now, this team is the definition of mediocre. They almost are perfectly 500 in this regime's, tenure. And that's not good enough for Jim Irsay. That's not good enough for Colts fans. We got used to winning 12 games and playoffs and Super Bowls.
Absolutely spoiled.
Manning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With Peyton Manning, then we went from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck, which, we won, when
we were
healthy, 11-5, 11-5, 11-5, won the division, won multiple playoff games with Luck. Whenever he was healthy, and then, the whole retirement fiasco happened. But, it worries me because you sit back and you look at teams like the Miami Dolphins, who, when Dan Marino retired, they still haven't replaced Dan Marino. It's been 25 years almost. And, you sit there and worry, you're like, well, are we going to go 2 decades without finding another one of those guys? But what's great about having Jim Irsay as an owner is he will not settle for that. He will do whatever it takes, whether it's paying $50 million a year in signing bonuses. The money is unlimited in his pocket for the Indianapolis Colts, and he demands excellence. And if you can't deliver that excellence, you're going to be out the door. So yes. I think that's where this offseason is going to be a little different, because I think, after that meeting, I don't necessarily know if Chris is his job is in trouble just this year, but I think that seat's a little warmer. And Frank Reich, look, to be honest, Frank Reich's the one that banged the table for Carson Wentz. Chris Ballard wasn't convinced. Jim Irsay wasn't convinced. Frank Reich's the one that pulled them in and said, look, go get me this guy. I can win with this guy. Because they both, from everything I've heard, they were not impressed with Wentz. They didn't want him, to make the trade. They weren't a huge fan of his, and Frank Reich convinced them. So this was Frank Reich's guy.
Yeah, I think Frank Reich doesn't get a lot of the blame for this season too, and I think he does. He deserves, especially for those meltdowns the last 2 weeks of the season. That's on coaching as well.
Absolutely,
like that's not.
It wasn't just on
players
Carson Wentz. Those guys didn't even show up.
Yeah, that Jacksonville game was atrocious. Like absolutely hard to watch. Even
embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. Like even if you're not if you hate the Colts, and it's probably great to watch, but but if you like football in general, they played awful. Like they were like completely, they looked like the roles were reversed. It looked like Jacksonville needed to win that game to make the playoffs. Indianapolis season was over.
Yeah.
Like they were literally looking for the number one pick.
And it looked, as bad as the optics are with it too. I mean, once those Pro Bowls got announced, which you saw on Hard Knocks, Hard Knocks was following the Colts. You saw on Hard Knocks, those Pro Bowls got announced, the guys jumping up and celebrating the next two games. They took the next two games off. I think that they thought, hey, look, we got what we were after. We're getting these awards. The media's hyping them up. After the Arizona game, you turn on Good Morning Football. They're saying the Colts are the team nobody wants to play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Colts are the team that can get hot and make a run.
That was said a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think they bought into their shit didn't stink for a little bit because we're getting all these individual awards. Walter Payton Man of the Year. The leaderboard, Kenny Moore was second in the leaderboard, which, I'm not saying anything bad about Kenny. I mean, Kenny's a great player, great person, but, these guys took, I think they took those awards and they took all that media hype. And I think they kind of bought into it a little bit because it showed up on the field. These guys were not ready to play. They were not prepared.
No.
And it was embarrassing to the organization. It was embarrassing to the owner. And it was embarrassing to the fans. And I think that's why you're seeing such I'm not going to call it desperation, but I think this is why you're seeing more of a okay, maybe our philosophy of doing absolutely nothing in free agency and just using the draft, maybe we need to get a little bit aggressive. And I fully expect them to be aggressive. Now, as long as they try and they get aggressive, I'm not going to blame them because look, when it comes to free agency, it takes two to tango. The players got to want to come here. The Colts got to want to play them. So if the Colts go after a guy, but he takes another deal, I'm not going to fault them for that because at least they tried. At least they tried to get aggressive.
Right.
They tried to go after a guy. But I think at the end of the day, look, like I said, I think Frank Reich's coaching for his job this year. I think the playoffs are a minimum because they're in this position. A big reason why they're in this position is because Frank Reich stuck his neck out for Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is holding that axe right above his neck right now, and he damn near chopped it off with that Jacksonville game. So I think,
where do you think he winds up?
Carson, man, dude, I don't know, because the thing with Carson Wentz is, and I think that's what makes him so frustrating as a player, is because the dude just oozes talent. I mean, he's mobile. He's hard to sack, hard to take down, got a huge arm. I mean, he's everything you want in a prototypical quarterback in today's NFL. But for whatever reason, whether that's, his inability to take to hard coaching, whether it's his inability to read the defense, the film study. I'm not going to pretend to know how much time the guy spends in the film room. I mean, he's an NFL player, so he has to watch film, at some point, but he has all the talent in the world. And I think that's what's so frustrating is I don't know where the disconnect is between the talent and the on-field product.
Yeah, there's definitely disconnect somewhere. He's way too good to be playing the way he plays. It's reckless football. Like when it matters the most, like I said, it's hard to make excuses for the guy, but I do find it very interesting where he can wind up. Because I don't know, I don't see him as a backup, but what team is willing to take him right now? Like Washington, maybe. I mean, but I think but they have Heineke, and he's not terrible. And
but see, this this is where the NFL does the whole, the recycling process, because Wentz is talented. And if somehow you can tap into that talent, the guy's a borderline MVP candidate if they tap into that talent. But it just hasn't shown itself outside of, the 1 year in 2017. Every other year it's just been mixed results, and, sometimes to a disastrous level. The mixed results are. But as we know, NFL coaches, I mean, you don't get to where you are as an NFL coach. You don't become an NFL coach unless you got a little bit of dog in you, where, you think like, look, if I get a guy this talented, I can fix him. I can make this work.
Yeah.
Every coach thinks that. So, I mean, could there be some coaches willing to take a chance? Could, Washington, possibly Pittsburgh, possibly, could be an
Oh
option.
yeah, forget about them.
Tampa Bay.
They seem pretty content with Mason Rudolph.
I don't know. I think that might be more of a smokescreen.
I tell you what, man, if Mike Tomlin even finishes with a winning season this year and Mason Rudolph's their starting quarterback, you have real conversation who the best head coach of football is.
Well, second best, because I think Bill's still around. So, look, man, and then also too, Bruce Arians is a huge Carson Wentz fan. Bruce Arians has always spoken extremely highly of Carson Wentz, and it just so happens Tampa Bay is in need of a quarterback. So is it possible? Who knows if anybody trades for him or not? I think the market is lukewarm at best. I don't see anybody making a trade, especially if the Colts are just going to cut the guy. I don't see why you would give up anything of value for him. So if the Colts do make a trade, you're hoping for, at best, maybe a third rounder, maybe.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario.
More than likely, you're looking at a fourth or fifth if you do end up moving him. Regardless, you're not going to recoup what you spent to get him. And I think that's what's so awful. I will say this. The media is acting like the Colts gave up their first round draft picks for the next decade to get Carson Wentz. Whenever it comes to, it's like, well, the Colts don't have any draft capital to trade for Russell Wilson. They don't have any draft capital to trade for Aaron Rodgers. That's just false. I mean, we literally just saw Seattle, or not Seattle. The Rams do this with Stafford. They didn't use a first round pick for this, that year's draft. They used the next two drafts and Jared Goff into the deal, and a third round pick. So, I mean, could you see something similar with Seattle if Russell Wilson says like, look, hey, this is the team I'm waiving my no trade clause for. I want to go to Indianapolis. Can you make that happen? Could Seattle, now in need of a quarterback, could the Colts throw the next two first rounders? Could they throw in maybe a third rounder, or, Ryan Kelly, somebody like that, and Carson Wentz into the deal?
I mean,
and look, say what you want to about Carson Wentz. Everybody wants to talk about the money on it, but after this next season, there's no dead money. You can get out of that contract, and you're looking at saving $28-30 million if he doesn't, work out wherever he goes next. I mean, that's a very team-friendly contract that is extremely easy to get out.
Oh yeah. I think you just abandon ship and you hope for the best. I mean, I think that's what you have to do at the end of the day. But if it's me, I would trade the farm to get a franchise quarterback, man. Like,
sure.
At the end of the day, like, you can give them 3 first rounders for the next, 3 years or whatever you want to do, and trade off.
And I honestly don't think
I would part ways with, like, pretty much anybody on my roster would be available. Like, that's how I would look at it.
I probably wouldn't, there's only like 3 or 4 guys I probably wouldn't trade. I'm probably not moving DeForest Buckner. I'm probably not moving Darius Leonard, and I'm probably not moving Jonathan Taylor, which, granted, we know running backs, it is what it is. That guy's not a normal running back. We'll see what happens whenever
really good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're talking about league MVP type of production at that position. That doesn't come around very often, even for a running back position. So I don't think I'd move him. Quentin Nelson.
Yeah,
it would hurt me. It would hurt me too. But the guard position is it's the guard position. Well, granted, he might be the best one in the league, or at least in the conversation, if not the best one in the league. But whenever he was out this year, we saw Chris Reed step in. That offensive line didn't miss a beat. And now you're going to be his 5th-year contract's coming up after this year, and you're going to be paying a guard $20+ million a year, and you still have no left tackle. So, is Quentin Nelson possibly on the table? It wouldn't surprise me. I don't think the Colts would do it, but if I were them, I think you'd have to look into any option. And the thing with Russell Wilson, he's great. He's going to be 34 this year, but he's probably got at least 4 to 5 years of really good production left. He takes care of his body. He's, extremely smart. He's very durable when it comes to being injured. And I think Frank Reich, look, Russell Wilson's been an elite quarterback with, them running a basically archaic offensive system almost his entire career. I think if he gets an offensive coach like Frank Reich and is able to experience like, hey, look, there's guys wide open, all over the field. It's an intrigue. I'm intrigued. I said I wasn't going to bring up the hypothetical, but look, that's the type of guy you've got to swing for if you're going to swing.
Well, especially the AFC is going to be it's going to be a very quarterback driven conference.
Oh, it's a gauntlet.
We've already talked about that with all the young talent where, you're going to have to get the guy in order to be competitive in the AFC. Like I don't even know if year one Russell Wilson would be the guy right now.
I think he would step in and I'm not saying I think he's going to be, Mahomes or Josh Allen or one of those guys, but I think with the team the Colts would have around him, especially if they go out, they get a guy like that, and then they attack free agency. They sign an Allen Robinson to pair with Pittman. They draft a receiver.
Oh my God. I'd love to see Allen Robinson somehow get out of Chicago, man.
Oh, I don't think he's going to be back. I can pretty much guarantee he's not going to be in Chicago. But
good.
But yeah, say you get a guy like that, Allen Robinson, Pittman, you sign another tight end, maybe Dalton Schultz, and you draft a left tackle and another wide receiver. Say, John Mechie falls into the 3rd round because of the ACL tear. So you're looking at running Robinson, Pittman, Schultz, Jonathan Taylor, John Mechie, Campbell.
I'll tell you something else. I don't know if you thought too much about this or not. I feel like the Jaguars are getting closer to being a good team too. Like I do feel
that's why I said that, earlier.
That's a huge deal. Like I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be good.
If Trevor Lawrence hit, and now they actually have an adult in the room with Doug Peterson.
Yes, like they've got the right guy. And look Doug Peterson was the head coach when Carson Wentz was an MVP level. Like Frank Reich he was the offensive coordinator, but Peterson also knows how to scheme offenses and
Peterson was a quarterback also.
Yeah, he's going to build that roster up. Like they're a few years away, but they're going to be good, man. Like that's going to be a good team. Tennessee's won the division the last 2 years. They're not going to be they're not going to be, I don't think they're an AFC championship team, but they're not going anywhere right now. They still got a pretty good roster.
Depending on who they lose to with cap casualties and free agents.
Houston's a dumpster fire. That's the one.
There's a lot going on. I don't really worry about Houston, but I think right now, look, the Colts have the money. They can make some moves to possibly get up to 70 million, depending on guys retiring, moving Carson Wentz. They could have $70 million to go into free agency with this offseason if they play their cards right. And, that's in a class that's loaded at tight end, loaded at wide receiver, and, in the draft, and, wide receivers in the draft are just loaded as well this year. And then you also have a loaded free agency class with wide receivers. You have a loaded free agency class with tight ends. The the offensive line class in the draft is actually really good this year. You can fix your holes. I think they still need a veteran pass rusher, but outside of that, on the defense, I think the defense is really good. Maybe cornerback, safety, some depth there. But I mean, the team's not as far off as what people think they are. I think this collapse really put a stink, which rightfully so, on the organization. But look, there's really elite pieces throughout each level of the team outside of outside of maybe left tackle and quarterback, those two positions. But outside of those, I mean, you have a Pro Bowl level defensive player at every position, defensive line, linebacker, DB room with Kenny Moore, Rocky Sin. Those, I think, like I said, they definitely still need a veteran pass rusher, like for certain. Michael Pittman, I think, is with the right quarterback. I think the guy's going to be a stud. He's a stud receiver.
Yeah, he's better than what I thought he was going to be for sure.
I liked him coming out of the draft, but I think he's going to be really good. If you get a guy opposite him that can take pressure off of him, because there were some times last year where Michael Pittman was triple covered and Wentz is still forcing the ball. Yeah, Wentz is
the only option he really got.
Yeah,
like their receiving core is definitely it's kind of progress. It's that.
Yeah, they need some pieces there for sure. So, I mean, I'm interested to see, but look, the combine starts this week, starts on Monday. You're going to be seeing this is where moves are made, or at the combine. You get all these GMs around each other, teams start talking, deals get made at the combine. That's what happens in the NFL. So, I think everything's waiting on the Aaron Rodgers domino to drop, whether he's retiring, whether he's coming back to Green Bay, whether he's not retiring. I don't think
he can't retire the same year Brady retires. That ego won't allow it.
I don't.
We haven't really touched on that. We haven't touched on that love letter that everyone's talking about.
It's a Green Bay.
Yeah.
I mean, Pat McAfee. I mean, it was literally on McAfee. Like he talked about it, on Tuesday. He said, he just got back from his, yearly retreat where, he just reflects on the season. He reflects, and he said it literally was just a post of thanks, because he came out of that just feeling thankful, and he wanted to thank those guys. And that's really all it was.
What else happened that week?
I don't know what else happened.
His engagement was called off.
Yeah, I mean,
you've been in relationships before, long-term relationships. You get, no matter if it's good, bad, or in between, you get a little bit more in your feelings. And I think he had a keyboard in front of him, had a couple drinks, and that's what happened with him.
Oh, man. Had an eyelash stuck in my
I don't make anything of it. That's what I'm getting at.
No, I don't either. I don't think that was a retirement post. I don't think that was I think it literally just, like, it was what it was.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I do appreciate about Aaron Rodgers is everybody thinks this guy is yeah, like everybody thinks this guy's so like cryptic and like he's hidden messages and like all that. Like, no, like he is who he is. Like if he posts something, he's just posting something. It's not some deep meaning to shit. I mean, he's just a real dude. Like but regardless, I think everything's waiting on that shoe to drop. So once that shoe drops, I think that's when you're really going to start seeing like, hey, this is when the dominoes start to fall. I'm really curious about this Russell Wilson thing, because he did take all mention of the Seahawks off of his social media pages. And the team's over the cap. They're not going to be very flexible. I think they just had a down year. There's not really a bright future there. I think he might be. I don't necessarily think he's going to demand his way out. I don't think he wants out, but I don't think it's going to be as clear cut as, like, hey, this guy's coming back for certain. I mean, that might be 98% sure he comes back, but there's still that 2% chance that, as we know in the NFL, anything happens. I mean, nothing's off limit in the NFL. That's what makes it such a great league.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's the state of the Colts podcast. We'll see where it goes after the combine. Tuesday, Chris Ballard and Frank Reich both have a press conference with the media. I'm sure we both know what that's going to end up being like. I mean, that's just going to be Carson Wentz, Carson Wentz, Carson Wentz.
That's all they're going to talk about.
That's all they're going to talk about. But I am curious to see the answers. I'm curious to see how they handle some of the questions that come their way as far as, you know, the reports about, hey, everybody's reporting you're moving on from this guy. What's going on? And you're gonna,
are you moving on from this guy?
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna get the cryptic, like, we're not gonna talk about guys under contract. We're not gonna talk about this. We're not gonna talk about this. But I think it is interesting that the last few years, man, my eyes. I've got something in my eyes. It's killing me. I do think it's interesting the last few years, like with Jacoby Brissett, hey, we like Jacoby. Phillip Rivers, hey, we want Phillip Rivers back. We want him to be our quarterback this next year. When it comes to Carson Wentz, you heard, well, we're not going to comment. Yeah, we're not going to comment. We're not going to comment on guys, that are still on the team. So I mean, it's very different from the last couple of years of what they've said when it comes to the end of the season quarterback talk. So I'm curious to see how this press conference is going. I'm curious to see how this plays out. And look, this might be the most vital offseason for the Colts in maybe the Colts history, because this is it's either going to work or it's not. And you're going to have multiple guys looking for new jobs this next year. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
Your eyes all right, man?
Yeah, man, I got an eyelash in them, and it's I can't get it out because I can't leave to go, rinse them out. But, I mean, unless you want to take it over for a few minutes here and talk about some Colts news you got on your plate here.
Well, I think everything's been pretty much said that I can think of. I don't really have much else to say. Like, I'm already looking forward to the next year for football in general. It's going to be interesting. I think, there's always interest in the offseason in the NFL. It never stops, which makes it fun. But, man, you're really tore up about this Carson Wentz stuff, bro.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting over here, eyes are watering. They're red. I just don't know what the direction my Colts are going to move on. So, well,
we're going to call it on that note.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, if you were a fan of another team, you didn't want to listen to this, I'm sorry. There's just stuff that me and Jared had to talk about. I, wanted to get off my chest. And if you're a Colts fan listening to this, let us know in the comment section what you think we should do, whether you think Wentz should be back or not. Let us know who your option is for quarterback going into the season, and, what direction you would kind of take this. And I will say this, combine starts. See, of course, as I'm ending the show, everything is good now. I got the eyelash out of my eye. Everything's good. So yeah, if you're watching it on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed that little fiasco we had here. That was indicative of the Carson Wentz thing, where, I made it through almost the whole show. I just collapsed there the last couple minutes. Absolutely bombed on YouTube there. So yeah, look, the combine starts. We're going to start getting more into draft coverage. Andrew comes back next week. We're going to be starting to dip our toes into the mock draft waters. Whether that's next week, we'll see. But we're really excited for some of the shows coming up, because, as we know, there is no off season in the NFL. It's a full year thing, and we are here to talk about it. We'll see what happens with baseball. Not looking good right
Lord.
now, but
no, it's
always,
not looking good at all.
As always, we really like to keep an eye on that. And I'm really excited. Got my Horizon Forbidden West out here on PlayStation 5. Been playing on that the last couple of days. Got a 3-day weekend to really put some time into it. So I'm really excited to kick that off. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful game. I can't believe games look that good. It is, it's shocking. Just how gorgeous everything is. We've come a long way from Sunset Riders and Turtles in Time. I'll tell you that.
Still love Turtles in Time.
I know. You have my coffee.
I do.
So yeah, man. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. We will be back next week with the 3-man rush, not the 2-man rush. And we're going to be really getting into the NFL offseason, especially some shoes start to drop here this next week. So I'm really excited. So thank you guys so much for listening. Check us out on 3-Man Rush Podcast, YouTube. Check us out, 3-Man Rush Podcast, Spotify, Apple. Hit subscribe, hit the like button, and we will see you guys next week.